Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Reclamation Hour podcast. We are coming back to our Sacred Feminine Arts series. It's not really a series, but if you've been following the podcast and you know that periodically we do these Sacred Feminine Arts episodes where we really talk about things like we did grief rites, we did a tarot one, things like that. So today we are going to talk about ceremony and ritual as a sacred feminine art and why it's so important to us. I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I obviously, as a priestess who holds ceremony every single month inside the temple, I think that ceremony is wildly important and something that is extremely missing from modern day society. And before I forget, as we go through this discussion, if this piques your interest and you want to try out sitting in sacred feminine ceremony, then you can join the temple. We are closing the doors for the first time in like almost a year. So October 3rd, 2025, we will be temporarily closing the doors down to new members temporarily. So if you want to get in, now's the time, because when we reopen, there's going to be some structure and pricing changes. But if you join us now, you will get locked in at the current rate. So all the information for that is in the show notes. Is there anything you want to say before we start talking about ceremony?
No, I think you did a wonderful job. I just have to say I agree with you. And that's something that I see a lot as someone who is a somatic practitioner and facilitator for folks, is that, and really from a decolonial lens, ceremony is absolutely dire to the human soul. We can obviously get into the more specifics of it.
Yeah, I want to talk. That's one of the things I want to talk about, because ceremony and ritual, one of the things about this is that as human beings, our species evolved with these things.
Yes.
And so we are feeling the lack of regular ceremony and rituals and sacred rites very deeply for most of us on a soul level and just a physical, like, nervous system regulation level.
Right.
Because we used to have ceremonies and rites and rituals that would mark and hold us through various different, what is the word I'm looking for here? Like moments in life.
Rites of passage.
Yeah, so we used to have these rites of passage, right? So when a young girl gets her first menstrual cycle, when somebody goes through menopause, marriages and baptisms and funerals we still have, but we used to have ones to mark manhood and womanhood. I've seen a lot of interesting discussions lately around how in various indigenous cultures, men would go through these various rituals and rites that were often like near-death experiences in some capacity.
Yeah.
And without the safety of doing that within a ritual guided by elders, we now have teenage boys who are unconsciously seeking the same thing, and maybe it's not so safe the way that we have them seeking this. So I Googled it, as I do when we start these episodes, and Wikipedia, that it just says a ceremony is a unified ritualistic event with a purpose, usually consisting of a number of artistic components performed on a special occasion. So this is where, for example, a marriage ceremony is an example of a ceremony. And so ceremonies can be very spiritual in nature, but they can also be secular in nature as well. Because while one component of why we might sit in ceremony is to connect with the divine, which we still see in churches around the world and other religions as well, it is also for like social networks and building community and marking these special occasions. So we still do have some of these that we see very regularly, even within secular life, such as a marriage or a funeral. I don't know. Is there anything you wanted to say right there about like, and then I want to list a couple of these things quick.
I think from a more somatic lens, we know that the ventral vagal state, which is the state that we're in when we're relaxed and safe, right, is also known as a social engagement system for that reason. And that highlights that as humans, we are wired for connection. And so it really shows that one of the primary ways that we regulate and calm our nervous system is through safe, relational and supportive, relational dynamics and social interaction, because that, the ventral vagal state comes on, right? And it's part of, it's part of indigenous knowledge that came about. You know,
Yes.
our ancestors knew this, right? It's part of that as well. There's this quote that I really love from his name is Dr. Michael Yellowbird, and he wrote a piece called Neurodecolonization, Applying Neuroplasticity to
Mm.
Promote Indigenous Well-Being. And he is, I think he's a social worker, but he really works within the realms of decolonizing social work and really the psycho-spiritual dimension of healing. And so he quotes, "Our ceremonies and embodied practices are not just cultural expressions, they are neurophysiological interventions designed by our ancestors to
Mm.
regulate, heal, and connect us to the sea."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're going to, I think, probably focus on the fact that there is a huge spiritual component, and might I even say magical component to
Yeah.
ceremony when the two of us tend to do ceremony. But before we get into it too much, I just do want to presence that this can be done in a secular way, and that spiritual connection is not the only thing that ceremony
Right.
is good for. And when we think about ceremony, and this is where ceremony can look so many different ways, so many different ways. But oftentimes there might be drumming. Okay, this helps to regulate your nervous system. There might be dancing or chanting, or this helps to regulate your nervous system. Sitting on the ground can help to regulate your nervous system. All of these different components that are often a part of ceremony help to regulate your nervous system.
Yes.
And so this is why, like I was saying before, so many of us are unknowingly and unconsciously, without being able to name, that this is one of the things we are deeply, deeply missing.
Yes.
Is access to regular ceremony and then rites of passage, because our physical bodies evolved with this as a thing we do regularly. And now most of us don't have that, because even for most people, you know, yes, like a church ceremony is a ceremony, but it often doesn't necessarily involve some of these pieces, right?
Right.
So some people do find this healing and this connection within a church, and other people don't. And this is, in my opinion, though, one of the big things that Christianity, at least in the West, kind of the advantage that they have on sacred feminine spirituality and indigenous spirituality and all these other spiritual paths we can be on, is that there is a church on like every other corner in the United States.
Right.
And it's very normal to go to church on Sunday and then do the rest of your life. Like, that's a very normal thing within society. And for those of us then who are not feeling like we want to go to church regularly, we lose that and start to feel like what we're doing is crazy, in quotes, or weird, in quotes, when really church services are new in comparison to other types of ceremony.
Yes. Yeah, to our ancient practices that were quite it was a whole lifestyle. It was regularly practiced. You know, even, and that's some of the things, you know, that you named, like drumming and dancing and entering these trance states, right? Processing grief, because we did a whole episode on grief rites and really what that's for, what, you know, what that was used for. But also, you know, shaking, and there were communal rituals, right? And they were meant to restore our vitality, but also I think the thing about us constantly wanting ceremony or ritual or really craving it, even if it's on a very subconscious level, is that we are souls, right? And so our souls are always trying to reconnect with the divine.
Exactly.
And that's just one of the most beautiful ways that you could do it in a very embodied manner, is to hold ceremony or hold ritual through to that.
Yeah. And our soul is always, like you're saying, always trying to reconnect with the divine, right? And the thing about being human is that we tend to end up with all of these layers of things that our soul has to sort through in order to reconnect. We have all of this conditioning, all of this wounding, all of this, you know, just baggage that comes with being a human being, even if you were raised without big T trauma, even if you were raised outside of the church. Just this is what happens, is when you're a human, you pick up the worldview of the people in the society around you. And then we have to filter through that worldview in order to have an authentic connection with the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are lots of ways to do ceremony, but for example, this is how and why I run ceremony on a monthly basis, is so that people have that monthly touch point to sit in a very, like, I run a specific type of energetic ceremony. And for me, right, it's really about creating those conditions for somebody to come in and hear their soul and connect with their soul and help them to much more quickly separate out that conditioned voice that's in your head from the soul voice that's in your head.
Yeah.
And so this is just one type of ceremony, but this is the type of ceremony that I run. And so this is where we, you know, there's a specific ceremonial flow. We tend to be in and out of meditation, but there's just lots of ways to do ceremony. And what I have found is that when you do this regularly, there's a compounding effect.
Yes.
So there are different types of ceremonies. So if you think about like a plant medicine ceremony, these are actually not ceremonies that are meant for you to do regularly.
Right. Emphasis on that.
They are meant for you to do like a couple times in your life. And then spend the time in between integrating. The type of ceremony I run, there's more of a compounding effect, right? So as you come more and more regularly, it's easier for you to connect with your soul and hear your intuition and come into alignment with yourself. And these are all of these different types of ceremonies that we talk about. This is stuff our ancestors were doing. This is stuff indigenous cultures have been doing. This is stuff that, you know, they were doing in the temples of ancient Egypt, in the Eleusinian mysteries, in ancient Rome, in, you know, the Druids, like, and then that's all fairly recent. Like even the, you know, the Roman Empire or the Greek Empire is fairly recent human history, even though we start to call it like ancient Egypt.
Right. It's not, though. It's not actually.
Right.
We have up to 30,000 years of human history, y'all.
And so that's just recorded.
That's just recorded.
Human history is like hundreds of thousands of years old. And so we're calling this a sacred feminine or a feminine art, sacred feminine art.
Yeah.
Because of the long history and traditions of priestesses and witches and wise women doing this. However, of course, lots of medicine men, lots of priests, lots of sacred men have also been holding ceremony throughout the ages. But when we dig far enough back through the archaeology and the recorded history, we do find that most places were revering the sacred feminine in some capacity. So... and obviously, like, I run sacred feminine ceremony. So, that's that.
Yeah. Or, you know, even if it wasn't just sheerly, like, only, you know, sacred feminine, it was, you know, she was always involved. The goddess was always involved.
Right.
So.
And I think in ancient communities, you know, this is my feeling. This is not necessarily a fact. So I do want to presence that, because somebody is going to be like, well, actually in ancient Rome, this and that and the other. I totally believe you. In general, I think that ancient people had a better balance of masculine and feminine.
Yes.
And so even if you were, for example, maybe like a priestess in a temple for a goddess, it wasn't that the god didn't exist.
Right.
Or that he was evil or that he was less. It's that you were just focused on this thing over here. Or the opposite, right? Maybe you were in service to a male god. That didn't mean that his feminine counterparts didn't exist. This is where we get into that monolatry versus monotheism thing, that ancient people tended to, even the ancient like Israelites and such weren't practicing monotheism.
Nope.
They were practicing monolatry, which was worshiping one god while acknowledging the existence of others, but just worshiping the one God. Whereas monotheism says, no, there is only one God. Everything else is fake.
Everything else
really
is
simplify it down.
Okay.
Everything else is the devil, right? So in ancient temples, we used to see priestesses, of course, holding things like marriage ceremonies or death rites and funerals, but also more regular ceremonies, also like consistent ceremonies, harvest ceremonies, ceremony and ritual specifically for deities to help ensure that the community would be taken care of. That the crops would grow and the rain would rain and these types of things as well.
Yeah.
So,
and just like simple, energetic cleansings and purification rituals that were also more frequent as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because these ancient, like, sacred people, the priests and the priestesses, were also healers. And they were also doing herbal medicine and anointing practices and spiritual hygiene, like removing of entities and attachments and all of these different types of things. So they were also the first banks. This is actually a lot of separate episodes, but
it is a lot of separate episodes, but yes.
But it was the ceremonial piece that when they would go into ceremony for themselves or for the public, that they would then decide, how do we best help heal the community? How do we distribute these resources? How do we, it was very community centered.
Absolutely.
Is the thing. So a couple of the things that Google mentions, right, is marking transitions. So this is where I think our society has really failed, where we begin to no longer have our ceremonies. So this is, like we've kind of mentioned, right, marriage and death. We also kind of have graduations still on a secular level, but we don't necessarily hold the same type of ceremonies anymore for pregnant women, for births,
postpartum,
for all of these different things used to be marked by ceremony.
Yeah, for your bleed every single month too. There were so many. Ceremony was really an integral part of us as human beings. Yeah, these were like I think the key thing to understand here is that ceremony and ritual practices were really something that integrated like mind, body, and spirit, right? As well as community, because we knew and we understood that healing was never an individual or isolated act, but it was really a relational and communal one. And I think the Lakota people have this saying, which I thought was very interesting, but they usually say, like, when somebody gets ill, the community says thank you, right? Because your illness brings to light the dysfunction of our community, and your healing is our healing, and our healing is your healing. And we knew this wisdom. We practiced this wisdom. It was something that was deeply embodied in our regular day to day.
And then the patriarchal religion came in and said, actually, that is all a moral failing, and it's on you personally. And the 3D realm, your body, your menstrual cycle, the earth, this is all sinful, and we need you to rise above it. And so then the church ceremonies are about, or were for a while, depends on where you're going to church, right?
Right.
Because I've heard both of these stories, but about transcending all of that and getting away from it and repenting for your sinful nature. Whereas these ceremonies used to mark these very normal human experiences and hold them as sacred and hold them as divinity. And this really important piece of remembering that healing, like sometimes, yes, we need a therapist or we need a doctor or we need, but healing requires being witnessed.
Yes.
And so one of the reasons so many of us end up needing therapy, for example, is because we were never actually witnessed as not broken.
Yeah.
As there is nothing to fix, as just to be seen in whatever you are going through.
Yeah. And that's one of the things too that, I can just go on and on about this because the thing is, and this is like this is something, if you listen to Dr. Gabor Mate, he's one of my teachers, and he says something he says this all the time, it's not necessarily the trauma It's having experienced it by yourself
Hmm.
that
I watched a clip of him with, I can't think of her name. Everyone would recognize her because she's
yeah,
very well known.
Robbins or something like that.
Was it her talking about a childhood trauma she had been through?
Yes.
And he pointed out that yes, that was a trauma, but the actual trauma happened when she felt she couldn't talk to her parents about it,
Exactly.
which means there was already a rupture.
Yes. That is the rupture, right? And that's
Hmm.
part of being witnessed, right? And
Exactly.
and so I think
There's a
too.
book, Vienna Farron. I'll put it in the comments, but she talks about this too, that you cannot heal without being witnessed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, as a somatic practitioner, this is part of decolonizing somatic healing, right? It means
Hmm.
returning to relational, communal, and earth rooted ancestral
Hmm.
practices rather than only clinical frameworks. So, a
Exactly.
way, if you are someone who is also a practitioner or a somatic or a therapist, right? One of the ways that we can do this for our clients is making sure, or not necessarily, it's because it's not our responsibility 100%, but we also owe it to our clients to
Hmm.
ensure that they have supportive and safe relationships outside of our one-to-one relationship in here, right? Outside of the container that we're holding for them, because we understand that they must be witnessed, that they must be held, they must have safe connections outside of us as well, right? So really, this is one of the biggest things that I think I see in like the somatic world. I think we all need to emphasize having that support, that web of safety for our clients outside of, when they walk out of our door or when they walk out into the real world as well, because it is so critical.
And this is where, like we mentioned at the beginning, the temple doors are temporary closing and we're going to be reopening with some new structures. And this is one of those reasons, is because I really think, first of all, we'll probably have more podcast episodes coming up on being a practitioner because we both
Yeah.
have really strong thoughts. And as many of you probably already know, I'm working on some priestess training options for people. But in my opinion, part of what a priestess does and part of what a temple would have done is, again, it's not just about individual healing. It's about the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's about this interplay between collective healing and individual healing. And this is something that the sacred feminine really asks us to hold. It is this duality of sort of like the microcosm, right? Like healing for myself, being well for myself, these
Mm-hmm.
types of things. And then also looking at like the macrocosm, at my
Yes.
collective, and looking at where do I fit into my collective and how do I help to heal my collective?
Mm-hmm.
Because I cannot be well if my collective is not well.
Right.
But my collective cannot be well if all of us individuals are taking care of the collective at the expense of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, because we're all pieces of the collective.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those, like, the sacred feminine really asks this of us. And this is something, we can look to nature to see.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the forest I live in, if a tree like has a limb taken off of it, it needs to heal that
Mm-hmm.
limb. But the tree also can never be healthy without healthy soil.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires insects, and it requires mycelium networks, and it requires other trees to drop their leaves to compost. Like, it requires all of these other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this is where, ceremony really, when it's done well, helps us to hold this duality. And this is where I just want to be careful how I say this, like, especially priestesses, but other types of practitioners as well. I think that there needs to be a little bit of a shift into collective care when you
Yes.
are in that leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that more in a different episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's, because oftentimes again, this is like inherited shadow, unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
programming and material that has passed on, that we are separate really from everything, is separated from the community, separated from the earth. And so
Mm-hmm.
like being in community or communion with right, because we're talking about ceremony, so we're also being in communion with the element of fire, right? If we're doing candle
Mm-hmm.
stuff, we're also in community or in relationship with the plants that we're using. We're also, so again, there's like this relational aspect that continues
Yeah.
to miss the mark unless you're really, someone who attends ceremony or facilitates ceremony. But it's like communion with more than human things, right?
Yeah.
So ceremony is like a way that expands our awareness, right? Beyond my own body and into relationship
Mm-hmm.
with the land, with the elements, with plants, animals,
Mm-hmm.
ancestors. So it like really reminds us that our nervous system isn't an isolated event or an isolated
Yeah.
experience. It's nested within like this massive web of the manifestation that of divinity, really. uh
Well, and this is why when we do journey work inside of the ceremonies with me, I will often prompt, like when we're in there or walking down a
yeah.
path or something, like, what time of day is it?
Yes.
What season is it?
What
What
plant?
birds do you hear? Like, because
Mhm.
this is all your soul speaking to you. So
Yes.
if it's dark and it's snowy and there are no birds and all of a sudden you see, like a single owl, like this is all your soul speaking to you in archetype and mythology. That's very different than, well, it was a spring day and there were flowers everywhere and bugs buzzing around and there were
Mhm.
songbirds and there was a herd of deer. Like,
Yes.
that's a very different, and the sun is, it's
Experience,
like
yeah.
high noon.
Mhm.
This is a very different message that your soul is trying to tell you.
Mhm.
I've had people be like, well, on that side of the path, it was like summer, but on this side of the path, it was winter. And it's like, this is all this
Yeah.
is all your unconscious, your soul, the divine trying to communicate to you in
Mhm.
a way that makes sense because it is all so connected. We hold all the elements within us, we hold all the seasons within us. And connecting in this way regularly makes it easier and easier to hear.
Mhm.
It makes it easier and easier to see the connections.
Mhm.
And it helps you to feel whole so
Mhm.
that you're taking care of your collective from a place of overwhelm. And at this particular moment in history, when we need as many people taking care of the collective, whether that be to tear down old structures or build new structures, we have to be tending to ourselves and getting support for ourselves in order to be able to do that.
Mhm.
We just do. That's the only way we're going to be able to go out and make the change
Mhm.
that we want to see. So when I talk about this, right, like, I think everybody needs a priestess, everybody needs a coach, everybody needs a therapist. I don't have to
Yes.
be your priestess.
Right. Right.
Alexandra doesn't have to be your coach. Like, it might be helpful if it's not me, go find somebody who you do
Yes.
align with.
Yes. Just find
So,
someone. Find,
yeah,
even within that, like I like to say a lot because obviously we don't all have great families. Who's your
right.
chosen family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get to choose too. You get to choose who's on
Mm-hmm.
your team.
Which is
So,
even just an example of the patriarchy, the saying, blood is thicker than water.
yeah.
The whole saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the
Mhm.
womb,
Mhm.
which means your chosen relationships and the people for whom you are in relationship with is a stronger bond than your genetic.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
like, this is just an example of the
Yeah.
patriarchy, like,
Yeah.
destroy.
It's like there are things that we have to absolutely unlearn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes the other part of this is that we get so distracted from really what our soul requires, which is ceremony and ritual, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
certain things that we can't move past without ceremony and ritual. But we're learning, right? We're from the matrix, and I say that lightly because I feel the matrix is
Well,
a
we'll do an
term that
episode on
I have
the
talked about.
Matrix in quotes.
But
We'll do a Matrix in quotes episode.
But the colonial
Right.
patriarchy, really, the
Mm-hmm.
Western frameworks often approach healing as like consumption, right? Buying
Exactly.
supplements,
Mm-hmm.
buying, to fix oneself, buying,
Mm-hmm.
this like luxurious retreat. When honestly, sometimes you don't, sometimes you absolutely need that. Go for it. But sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
don't. Sometimes, like, that's it's really going down to like the compound interest of what's happening, on a
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day basis, on your devotion, on your like mundane, like day-to-day
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Because that's where the magic is at. That's where you're cultivating. That's where you're
Mm-hmm.
connecting. That's where you are able to, return to the divine. return to community and relationality and being in right relationship, right? And so ceremony is definitely, I think ceremony is one of those things that is reciprocal because you often, like, you give as much as you receive, right? Offerings, prayers, care, um, all of that. So yes, there's something about ceremony that just honors reciprocity and like being in right relationship with the community, but also the world, yourself, the divine. There's an emphasis, all of those aspects are touched in
Yeah. And
ceremony.
this is something there's going to be some updates for with the temple, with some guidelines for people to get even more out of ceremony coming soon. But like, this is where I want to say two things about doing this from a professional level. And then I want to move into like daily ceremony and ritual, like you're talking about, is that reciprocal piece is something that the systems that be have really destroyed for healers.
Yeah.
Because there's this idea that spiritual practitioners need to work for free. That if you really cared about healing people, you'd do it for free. Okay. I live in a late stage capitalistic society. I have to make money in order to survive. And I don't live in a society in which I'm in a temple and the community is all helping to take care of me. I don't live in a society where I can be like, yes, I'll trade you for some chicken. You know, like I do have to make money in order to live. And that's part of that reciprocity.
Yes.
Is taking care of your healers and your priestesses and your coaches and your medicine people in some capacity. And for a ceremony that is being held for you by somebody else, it's also an important part of the energetic field. As is with the type of ceremony I run, everybody who's there is working on being present, because ceremonies that I hold are not something that I just do and you watch. The ceremonial field, the energetic container we're all sitting in, is partly contained by everybody bringing their presence. And so now we have this energetic bubble to sit in to do the work that makes this all easier, as
It's
well
like the
as
Han Moon, you guys. If you guys are, if you guys have watched the K-pop Demon Hunters, it's literally like the Han Moon. Okay.
And then we have all of the people in the circle witnessing each other.
Yeah.
And this was arguably the hardest thing for me as a priestess, because I do coach also, is that I want to like come in with some duct tape and some glue, right? When like a woman comes through my gate and she's in tears and, you know, really bad things are happening and she's really upset. Like, I want to come in with some duct tape and some glue and be like, let's fix it and like
patch it up, right?
But what we need to do is just let it be okay.
Yeah. And let it be witnessed.
So it's okay that you're broken right now. We're all a little broken.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge piece of the ceremony part and even that energetic reciprocity.
Yeah, I was going to say the energetic reciprocity, I think that's, you know, colonial patriarchy has taught us to extract, and specifically extract from the healers, right? Yes. For that reason, because they knew
if I'm drained, listen, if I'm super drained from working 60 hours this week to make Ben's meat at some exhausting job, my ceremony is going to be shit. Yeah. Like, let's just be real.
It's going to really suck. It's not going to do much for you. But also there are multiple indigenous communities, especially within Mexico, that I see that they hold this belief where if you don't actually pay your practitioner, your witch, your shaman, if you do not, your medicine woman, if you do not pay them, it won't work. They truly believe that. And it's because it's the energetic reciprocity there.
Exactly.
Right? Because they need to be taken care of as well. They're taking care of you, you take care of them. And anything other than that would be extraction.
And this is something we see with New Age spirituality in like your own daily ritual and ceremony for yourself, is we always talk about grounding and pulling energy from the earth. Great. Okay. What are you doing to take care of the earth?
Yeah.
How are you in reciprocity with her? This is one of the reasons we leave offerings for our deities, not because they, in quotes, need you to give them an offering in order to be willing to help you, but because energetically, this offering helps to open the energetic channel. And so it makes it easier for them to help you more fully because you're both doing the thing.
Yeah. You're working
And we
as a
really have
team.
lost a lot of this.
Yeah,
Hmm?
absolutely. Yeah, we're working as a team. We're co-creating. And it's important to be able to give back. And there's so many ways that you can do that. You can leave offerings to the forest, right? You could do
Hmm.
that. But you could also, be an activist for endangered forests and deforestation.
Hmm.
And so it really, and there's so many ways that that can look too, right? Um, but I think the emphasis here is that reciprocity. It's that relational accountability. It's,
Hmm.
it's, and
See,
it's
and this is a good example of where the church is so often so close to getting it right. Because they have, in various churches, they have their idea of tithing and they have their
Mhm,
idea of like donating to the church. And
mm,
yes, but then it became like buying your way into heaven, basically, which is
basically.
clearly
Yeah.
clearly a problem.
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
but and this is again another place that the church kind of has one up on us, is that they are larger organizations, and so they can afford to take care of their ministers and their preachers,
Right.
who often have housing
Mhm.
provided for them and a salary
Mhm.
provided for them. So then you don't have to pay to go to church because there's enough donations and it's a nonprofit and they hold their thing. It's like a whole thing. They've got a whole system behind them.
Mm.
And we used to have that in the sacred feminine world pre patriarchy
Yes, we did.
as well.
We did.
So I want to give a couple of examples of ways that you can bring ceremony into your daily life. I'm just looking at like my list to see if there's anything else I really wanted to hit, but I think we really got through the list pretty well. Is there anything you wanted to talk about before we do that?
I think the other thing, because we touched base on extraction there,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight there was the cycles and timing, right? Because ceremony often follows natural
Mm-hmm.
rhythms, right, which
Yeah.
are cyclical, whether that's moon phases, seasonal phases,
Mm-hmm.
harvests, solstices, whatever. But ceremony has this way of basically synchronizing us, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
we acknowledge that we're part of a larger ecological cycle, which is basically countering that capitalistic like belief that you have to be productive all year round, right? And again, it's like another form of extraction, all of that. It separates, it kind of untangles our concepts, right? That we have, that our
Mm-hmm.
worth, that our self-worth is based off of how much we can reproduce, right? Because our net
Yeah.
worth, like that's the same situation. Like we put numbers on these things that we
Mm-hmm.
produce, right? But you start untangling that. And then you also acknowledge simultaneously, you're acknowledging that you are an extension of the natural world, of the earth as well, right? Because, and like you were starting to say, the phases that we're in and what tends to come up during a ritual or during a ceremony tends to mirror what's happening in the outside world, whether that's seasonally, whether that's astrologically. We understand that we are basically extensions once again of this web.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start to untangle and dismantle and disrupt these systems or
Yeah.
forces of oppression and colonial patriarchy. That's what I was going to say.
There we go. Boom.
I got it.
Yeah, and this is why ceremony was so threatening to the patriarchy for so long. All the types of ceremonies, because it reminds you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sitting in the right ceremonial space, and there are, again, lots of ways to do ceremony, in quotes, right. There are some ways to do it wrong. But we've got some episodes coming up on like spiritual hygiene and things, and you can listen to those. But when you're doing ceremony right, and again, numerous ways to do that, you are not only coming back into alignment with who you are,
Mm-hmm.
your authenticity, the divine spark within you. You're starting to hear your intuition. You're reconnecting with your guides and with the divine. You're regulating your nervous system. You're releasing entity attachments and vampiric spirit attachments that are making all of this harder for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit in ceremony that's well run, It is so efficient
Mhm.
because you are getting
Yes.
so much done at once
Mm-hmm.
that your ability to manifest the things that you want grows. Your
Yeah.
ability to move through the world differently.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability to make change in the world, your ability to make more money, which means you can make more change in the
More
world.
impact, absolutely.
All of this stuff becomes easier when you are sitting in ceremony regularly. And that is very threatening to the patriarchy. It's very threatening. And it's exactly what we need right now is more people sitting in ceremony more regularly, unless it's plant medicine, because that's not something you're supposed to be doing every other month.
Disclaimer.
So you, by all means, everybody, if you're feeling called to plant medicine ceremony, please go find a good place to do a plant medicine ceremony.
In a very
Listen to
good
our
place.
episode with Azrael first. But yes, so by all means, go do plant medicine if that is truly calling to you. The regular schedule of that though looks different than
Yes, usually.
other types of ceremony. So just keep that in
Should.
mind. It should. Yes, it's meant to.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to say because this is turning out to be a shorter episode, and usually we just chat forever.
Is it a shorter episode? I feel like we've been touching really well on these things.
Yeah, we're only at like 42 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
I know. Usually we hit an hour, and then I have to be like, okay, are we like gonna wrap it up?
Do
here?
you want me to cover ceremony from like a trauma informed lens? Maybe.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So I think.
And we were going to talk about ways to bring ceremony into your daily life. So let's talk your thing first, and then we'll circle back. Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to write it down.
So, as someone who is a somatic facilitator and practitioner for folks with a trauma-informed lens, of course, and a decolonial lens, I think that ceremony, at least from these lenses, there is something about it, about restoration of safety and regulation, right? And we kind of already talked a little bit about that, but because I'm saying this again, and I want to emphasize this because trauma basically fragments time. It fragments your body, it fragments the mind, it fragments the soul, and it fragments narratives that we hold, right? And ceremony basically creates this contained space with boundaries, with predictable rhythms, which again, we know that that's really good. That's very soothing to our nervous systems, and intention. So these are conditions that regulate the nervous system and restore that sense of safety again and bring you back into wholeness, into sovereignty. We covered the witnessing and the belonging, where we understand that healing recognizes, or healing requires recognition and witnessing, being witnessed and not being in an isolated, it's not an isolated event because most trauma, 99% of trauma is relational. So ceremony has that component, of gathering others, whether that is your spirit, that those are your spirit guides, your ancestors, your community, your chosen family, or really anything that's unseen, like plant spirits, etc. It's not just human beings witnessing you.
Exactly.
It's the spirit world as well. So to witness and to validate this person's experience, right? And have them be held during this these are ways in which trauma often starts, it starts unfolding, it starts dismantling, it starts to dissolve, really. Ritualized integration is the other one, because this is what happens is that trauma freezes in the body, or freezes the body in like the then. There again, trauma fragments time. And so the body kind of gets stuck in that particular experience, thinking that it's still that particular moment in time across all space and time, basically. And ceremony will ritualize the now. It's a pattern interruption, anchoring people back into time and space, right? Through these embodiment practices.
This is why in my ceremonies we spend so much time being present.
Yes. Yeah. It's a pattern recognition. So again, there is science, there's trauma-informed science to why in ceremony works so well, and why oftentimes it's more healing than going to traditional Western one-to-one talk therapy. It's because we're missing the piece. And that's the piece. It's going back to community, going back to being witnessed. It's ceremony, it's ritual.
And I find when you're in a ceremonial space, um, especially, so this is even, just my personal experience, sitting in the type of ceremony that I hold, is that when you're really present and you're being held energetically and you have really emptied out, you actually find what's sitting underneath all the busyness.
Yeah.
So for example, I've been taught to hold a gate. So we empty out and I'll hold like a gate question, right? Even something as simple as like, what do you need to release in order to be fully present? And oftentimes the thing that comes out of your mouth when you are in this fully present moment is not the thing you thought it would be.
Nope.
And then to be like, wow, that's the thing that's in the way of whatever we're working on. And then to witness that yourself, to have it witnessed by other people, that is healing. I remember the first time I sat down in this type of ceremony and I went through the gate and I instantly started to cry. And I was just like, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is happening?
Yeah.
But it releases things and gets, and then there's this is one of the things we can talk about ceremony in your daily life, but this ritualizing and the releasing.
Yes.
Are you ready to get rid of this? Are you ready to lay this down? Are you ready to step out of this pattern? Like burning things, just all of these different things we might include in a ceremonial space. Really just, it just works. Okay. It just works.
Yeah. I kind of had that experience, sharing my own personal experience. I kind of had that experience happen to me when you led ceremony on Sunday, during the Virgo eclipse. If I'm being completely honest, I was late to ceremony and I had texted Kate. I'm like, I'm going to be late today. I will be there as soon as I can. But, around 4 or 5 in the morning, I had a little PTSD situation flare up for me, as eclipses usually do,
as will happen,
as it will happen, where it was a tough, sticky situation for me, and this was a trauma that had occurred to me as a child. Obviously the psyche was ready to go ahead and pick at that a little bit, but I walked into ceremony late as fuck, but still I'm like, I'm gonna make it. And I sat there, and as soon as the meditation started, I dropped into meditation. I start bawling my eyes out. And it was because Kate was having us work with the sacred masculine and what that looks like for us. And guess what? That's what that was, the little PTSD flare up that I had was really about my sacred masculine and how, and it was, it was a relational trauma, with my father. And so I'm like thinking, I'm like, wow, like shit. So I start bawling my eyes out, and I just, by the end of it, I felt so wholesome. So like, and again, this was, if you are someone who lives with complex PTSD or PTSD, and how egregious these spirals can get, these episodes can get, it's really hard to be able to break that loop there. Ceremony did that for me on Sunday. It absolutely did. And I got to purge, and I got to reconnect with my sacred masculine, and I got to mend that relationship and view the sacred masculine differently within myself. The way that showed up for me was very kind. It was the complete opposite of the unconscious, again, it's that fragmentation. It was that fragmentation with my own relationship with the sacred masculine, because that's the way that I had witnessed it. And the way that showed up for me was very much, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And it's like, this is available. And I'm like, oh, fuck yes. Fuck yes, it's available. And so, yeah, honestly, who knows how that would have gone if I hadn't had the ceremony on Sunday, to be quite real. So
I'm so glad it was helpful. I did not want to do sacred masculine. I sat with
I
this
know
for
you
like
didn't.
3
And when
days,
you
and I was
mentioned that,
like,
I was like, you were supposed to, though.
I was like, is this really the thing I have to do? Because it's just not my favorite
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Because we all have our own shit. Even as a priestess, I have plenty of my own shit, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, is this? It's just I don't want to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the goddess
You,
was like, well, you are, so get on board.
well, you better, because Alexandra's
what
having
we
a
did.
crisis. But, you
So
know,
we
I
did
think,
sacred masculine.
but also the women that were in the ceremony also opened up, and it was like, yes, there was there was rage sitting there, and it's like, yes, like, yeah, you know, oftentimes, you know, for me it was like, yeah, there was rage, but it was like on the it's also grief that
Mhm.
turned into rage, right? Because I needed that protector. I needed that because I was alone. And
Mhm.
we couldn't, again, we need these containers to be
Yeah.
able to come back into center, even as practitioners,
Mhm.
even as
I just had that
facilitators.
happen this morning. I was on a call with a mentor, and um I was asking business questions because I've got a lot going on business wise.
Mm-hmm.
And, being a fellow priestess, she was like, I think we really just need to drop in and see what your body is saying. And
Yep.
this is where it's so helpful to have somebody else holding the space. And within 30 seconds, I'm bawling because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if I focus on business right now, I don't have to focus on the
Mm-hmm.
anniversaries of trauma I have coming up.
Mm-hmm.
For myself personally, we're about to hit the 1 year anniversary of one of the biggest traumas I've ever been through.
Mm-hmm.
And it is much easier for me to be distracted with business than it is to feel that. And I've spent a lot of time feeling in the last year. And honestly, I'm quite sick of it. And so I haven't been the last couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And to have somebody hold a very small ritual ceremonial moment
Yeah.
to be like, actually, though, it's really important to see what's sitting underneath this. And then I can like now actually move on with my day as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to,
Keep shoving it down.
yeah, because it's like a pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have, and I love therapists. I know that we have therapists who listen. I have had therapists as clients. I have seen really good therapists.
Mm-hmm.
This tends to be mind based.
She goes
Very
to
helpful.
still, like, we all
Yeah.
do it. Like,
Very mind based, very helpful.
right.
And when we are sitting in a ceremonial space, we are getting into the energetic and the body in a
Mm-hmm.
different way.
Mm-hmm. Deep
And
in
so
the
the two
psyche.
things do go into hand in hand. This is why I said earlier, I think everybody should have access to a psychologist,
Yes.
just like everyone should have access to a doctor. Everyone should have a priestess. It doesn't have to be me, but I think you should have one, personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is if your priestess and your somatic therapist or practitioner is also has their own somatic therapists and practitioners
Absolutely.
and priestesses, then, you know, it, we're not excluded from this.
Right. Yeah.
We're not excluded from this. We're still human beings. We also need to be resourced.
Yes.
So everyone needs it. Everyone needs ceremony. Everyone needs that safety, that the ritual aspect of it.
Yeah.
Everyone needs it.
So we are obviously huge proponents of having somebody hold ceremonial space for you. This is very powerful. For anybody who wants to learn to hold ceremonial space, follow me on Sovereign Priestess over on Instagram. We've got things for you. But because when you are sitting in a ceremonial space with somebody, just like if you are sitting in a safe partnership, you are borrowing their nervous system, you are borrowing their energetic field, you are borrowing all of these things. And so it's easier. It tends to feel safer. However, there are ways to ceremonialize and ritualize your daily life and ways that you can bring this into your day as well. So do you have some you want to start us off on some ways to do that for yourself?
Yeah, of course. So many ways
My
you can do
witchy
this for
friend.
yourself. My witchy friend. Yeah, there's so many ways to do this for yourself. Having a morning ritual for me in particular is it sets myself up for success for sure.
Yes.
And so, you know,
the morning ceremony, the morning ritual, you guys.
And you know what? Sometimes it's not for people. Sometimes a night ritual is best. But I like predictability and I like have very like ways that I like to set myself up for success.
But
So
the thing about putting it in the morning, when possible, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes,
yeah,
is that if the first thing you do, and obviously maybe it's second, okay? I understand everybody's life, especially
yeah,
if you have kids, wildly different.
yep.
But the earlier in the day you can connect with your soul and your deities and come into alignment with that,
Mm-hmm.
the goal then is to hold that connection through the day. Hard to do, but it sets like the frequency tone for your day.
That's the tone, absolutely. And it also
And
sets the tone for
so
your
it
home.
helps. It does. My husband and I skipped my morning routine the other day. It went really badly for the entire family. I am very not proud of it. And then when I stepped into my morning ritual, that was what my morning ritual was about. Was like, okay, on the days where I inevitably have to skip this,
Yeah.
how do we not let that happen again?
Right.
And, you know, my guides had things to say. My tarot deck had things to say, and I'm working on it. So I have homework. But anyway, so there is it is helpful to put at the beginning of the day,
helpful.
but wherever it fits for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
So yeah, I do really like I like to, and the thing is I like to interweave that with just like personal hygiene like that I do in the morning. So
me
like
too.
I'll wash my face. Obviously there's some glamour magic going on as well, okay?
Yeah. That's when I do my anointing, because look,
Yes,
I like
that's
to
when
do
I
my
do mine.
anointing before I put my makeup on, because otherwise you're putting oil on top of the makeup. It just seems, I don't know. It's
not good. It's not a
seems
good
like
way
it
to
should go
layer that, I don't
first.
think. Absolutely. But yeah, so usually I light some incense. I connect with spirit. Sometimes depending on the day I will light a candle, but usually like weekdays I skip over that. I skip over, unless I'm like I actually have time because I woke up just extra early for this. But, typical like morning, light an incense. I take care of myself. I wash my face, I brush my teeth, all of that, do some glamour magic, get ready for the day, put on some baller fucking music, start dancing to that, invite my ancestors to come dance with me. I don't do this every day, but I will oftentimes, like 2 to 3 times a week, I will pull some tarot. I also have my kids, get up and dance with me as well. They're not always super excited about it, but it just sets our day up for success. They have their little affirmations that we go over, especially in the car. But like, again, these little things can be like mini little rituals that you just do, and you can incorporate your family.
What makes something a ritual for you?
I think the
I mean,
intention.
we talked about this, but
We did, but I think it's the intent.
we were talking about it inside the workshop, not necessarily here on the podcast. Yes, we're in the middle of the Herbal Magic as a Sacred Feminine workshop. So if you want to join us in the temple, that's where, but this is where we were talking about intent.
Yeah.
So we have not talked about it on the podcast.
So it's about intention, and it's about, aligning your intention with action. It's actualized intention and presence, correct? Because when you're present, that's when you're connecting, right?
Exactly.
So when you're present, you connect with spirit, you connect with yourself, you connect with your ancestors again. And then I go and I get to do that with my kids too, right? Because they're also, it's like a good touching base, like connection with, or what's the term? Anyway. Yeah, so we touch base with our girls.
I should try doing the dancing with my kid, because we're kind of got it. This happened for a reason, but we're in this like trying to break this habit of waking up and turning on a screen really fast.
Yeah, and that's really easy to do, right? That's like autopilot.
Yeah, well, because then my husband's been out of town a lot. It's like a whole day.
Yeah,
I have reasons that we allowed this to happen, and also
I believe they're very valid.
They are, however. It maybe is time to create some better habits. So
yeah, so it's that, and you do it for your kids, and the kids are in the car, they start, doing their affirmations. And the same thing when I pick them up, like it's kind of the same thing. But also, on a more, again, it can be as mundane as possible, right? Where even when
there's a whole lesson on this inside, we have a Sacred Feminine course in the temple, and there is a lesson on how to create spiritual routines for yourself.
Yeah. So, I go about my day.
One to the podcast.
Sorry, go ahead.
Continue.
Oh.
So maybe that was the one we posted to the podcast, actually. So it might be here for you to listen to.
So anyway, I drop my girls off at school and then I do some activity. So whether that's somatics, whether that's going for a walk, right? I need to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm moving through energy before I hop into work stuff and client stuff. So again, it could be a quick workout. It could be just
Mhm.
somatics in bed. It could be just going for a walk. And really it's about again
Mhm.
creating that container and intention for presence and connection with my body, with what's
Yes.
coming up with my body, whatever's coming up for me emotionally, etc. Um,
Mhm.
and then obviously before I start actually working with one-to-one clients, I like to do energetic clearing and cleansing. And so I will often do smoke cleansing, like a little smoke cleansing ritual, um, connect with certain deities, etc.
Mhm.
Light a candle
And
for
this
that.
can all be so easy
It can.
throughout your day. And I think that it's that intention piece, right? Because lighting a candle
Mm-hmm.
can either be a completely mundane act
Mm-hmm.
or it can be a completely sacred act that casts a spell and connects me with the divine. And the difference is whether I've brought my full presence and intention to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
That is what takes something from mundane to magical. That is what
Yes,
ritualizes something. And
absolutely.
so while I ideally would have like 45 minutes every morning for my morning ritual, that doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also really like these small touch points throughout the day where you take a couple of deep breaths, you bring all of your presence to the moment. And yeah, that can be really,
Yeah.
really powerful.
I like to do that, by just there's an embodiment practice where you just settle into the body, and does that
Mm-hmm.
thing feel less as you bring more attention to it, or does it amplify, are you able to settle in
Mm-hmm.
your body? Because if you are, there's no actual present threat and you can interrupt that loop again, that stress loop.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's like a lot of somatic stuff that I like to incorporate, which is also to me, it's ritual. And also, I, even when I'm in a rush, like I anoint myself really quickly with anointing oils, or I use Florida water to bless my crown,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Um, Ritual baths are also a big thing in our house, especially too like when we're moving through actual sickness or maladies. um yeah, I like to do herbal baths. That's a pretty good way of doing
Mm-hmm.
that. um yeah, I think it's just so abundant. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
the options are limitless, the options are abundant. And then obviously we also do I also have mentors that I communicate with, that I'm in
Mm-hmm.
community with, that
Yeah.
hold me accountable, that witness me, that hold
Mm-hmm.
me. And so I do this with my mentors as well, which is again another form of ritual, as well as,
Mm-hmm.
Kate ceremony space every month in the temple. There's so much juiciness that really you can ritualize almost anything, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It requires presence to connect, and then it requires your intention and that
Mm-hmm.
action.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So these are all things that our
Mhm.
ancestors have been doing forever in ceremony as a community, in ceremony with their, whoever their version of priest or priestess is. And then also just throughout their day, this was just how people lived.
Mhm.
this was just
Yeah.
this was just a normal part of daily life. So I think that it's a fascinating sacred feminine art, especially because then there are all the different types of ceremonies that can be held. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's it. Do you have anything else you want to say? Otherwise, probably.
I do want to say that sometimes, honestly, there are days where my ceremony just looks like scheduling a good cry session. That's a thing.
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize like how such like a mundane act is actually like very spiritual act oftentimes, and very
Mm-hmm.
cathartic, very. So it doesn't always look magical.
Well, and that's where I think a lot of this it's about healing the divide, as if there is a
Yes.
difference between the
There
divine and
isn't. Yes,
the daily
exactly.
life.
Exactly.
And so this is how we bridge that gap. that society has worked very hard to convince us exists over the last 2,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. And then there's, maybe just the art of noticing, what color are the leaves today? Have they changed at all in the last 48 hours? Right. Because now the leaves are starting to fall. I just noticed before we hit record that my lilacs in my yard are blooming, which is weird because the lilacs, if you know, only bloom in the spring
right
and
now.
It's fall. And so again, sometimes it's just the acts of like noticing what's around you, the plant,
and letting the universe or the divine or whatever works for you there speak to you through these things, not in like a hyper vigilant, obsessive way,
right?
But letting the universe talk to you.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is being open to receiving messages.
And this is what ceremony is where we practice this. It's where we dive in and we get the clarity and we get the connection. And then the work is when we bring that out into our daily life.
Yes.
Is then we start to see then, wow, we see, for example, people will have a certain animal pop up in ceremony and then they'll see that animal in daily life.
Everywhere.
Or they'll hear a message in ceremony and all of a sudden that's coming through everywhere. So it's ceremony is an important piece of this. And then the work is to then bring that into your life.
Embodying it.
Yeah.
Embodying what you just ritualized.
Yeah. But that is what the sacred feminine asks us to do.
Yes. So again, very powerful stuff. You can do this, on an individual level, but I think it's safe enough for us to say, like, ceremony also requires community.
And in some way, I'm trying to real quickly decide if what I was about to say is true. Because it isn't, but it is. In some ways, doing it in community is what makes it ceremonial.
Yeah.
Now, not necessarily, because you can hold a whole ceremony for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's one of those, like, it's true, but it's not true, but maybe it's true statements. So, if it doesn't sit for you, don't.
I think it depends. It depends on what, but I think ceremony and ritual, the thing about that is because it connects you, right? It connects you to the divine. It also connects you to the divine within your surroundings. So whether that's on an individual level or a communal level, like, you're still forming part of this ecosystem.
Right.
And
for me, I think ceremony happens in groups, and that is the ecosystem piece. And then ritual can happen just for yourself, whereas ritual can also happen inside of a ceremony. But that's just me, and you can absolutely take or leave that. Like, nobody feel like, oh, Kate said this thing, and that's...
Yeah. And see, I agree with that too.
The truth.
Absolutely. I could see that for sure.
So, and I also think when you don't have somebody else holding the energetic space for you, it's a little bit easier to lie to yourself.
Oh my God, yeah.
So there's that piece too. But daily ritual and ceremony for yourself is still immensely powerful. So, yeah. All right. Well, I guess we will end it here now that it's been over an hour. See, we almost stopped at 42 minutes. I knew there was more for us to talk about.
There was
a
lot
normal
more
for us. All right. Well, like we've already mentioned a couple of times, monthly ceremony happens inside the temple. Even when we reopen the doors, if you are listening to this in the future, that will still be the case. But if you are listening to this before October 3rd of 2025, you can get in now before the doors close. And like I said, when we open them, we have a couple of structural changes and some pricing changes happening. So if you want in, now's a really good time to give it a shot. So we hope to see you there, but if not, we will see you here in the next episode. All right. Bye.
Bye.